Everyone, thank you for tuning in for another episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. We are a weekly podcast dedicated to sincere, in-depth investigations into the paranormal, supernatural, and the metaphysical, with a special focus on the UFO topic. We take a sincere, analytical approach, thoroughly evaluating each case and its implications. Our discussions go beyond the surface as we engage with researchers, investigators, and experiencers to explore the deeper layers of their testimonies. We strive for high-resolution analysis, carefully examining evidence, patterns, and perspectives that challenge conventional thinking. If you're looking for a podcast that seeks deeper understanding, you're in the right place. Please be sure to like and subscribe and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. You can also visit us at www.paranomalypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. Thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. Hey, everyone. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Our guest is Stephen Bassett, and he's the executive director of Paradigm Research Group, co-founder of Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, and the man who spent decades forcing Washington to confront the realities of the UAP presence. Hi, Stephen. Thank you very much for joining us.
Forcing Washington. Okay. I think more likely kind of encouraging Washington to do it, forcing, if you're a billionaire, you might be able to force Washington to do stuff, but not a poor political activist. But encouraging, oh yes, definitely.
Very good, very good. Stephen, tell us just a little bit about yourself. How did you get into the disclosure movement, wanting this all to come out?
Well, I like to think I didn't get into the disclosure movement, that I helped start the disclosure movement. Because when you say movement, you're really talking about activism. And by and large, from 1947 all the way into the 80s, there really wasn't an activist movement, certainly not in the traditional sense. I'm not saying that there wasn't some activist type things going on, but a movement, no. It didn't really start to come together until the very late 80s, early 1990s. And I think the individual who, you could say, started to formulate what would become a movement, though it wasn't the only thing that he was doing, was Stephen Greer. Because what he was doing, press conferences, significant press conference, bringing witness together, challenging the government and so forth, that is kind of the beginning. And that was in the very early 90s. I jumped in 96, but I didn't know, believe it or not, when I jumped in, about Stephen Greer. Oddly enough, I found out pretty fast. I wasn't aware of the Rockefeller Initiative. So, and that was clearly activism, and Greer was involved in that as some others. So I'm coming in around 96. And so I let my interest and so forth to the activist engagement. I was not interested in being a researcher at all. There'd already been 70 years, 60 some years of research piled on top of research, which obviously the government could care less about. I wanted to solve the problem politically, which is what it needed to do. So I've been an activist, and what got me into it was simple. I needed to do something with the rest of my life. I considered the options. Most of them were terrible, but this one is attractive. And John Mack's book, Abduction, and his history and his extraordinary prestige and as an activist professor and psychiatrist, and his dealing with the contactees and the book and so forth, just said, this is where to go. I had no idea where it would end up, but I said, this is where I need to go. And I volunteered for his organization, went out to Cambridge, spent 4 months there, got all stoked up, met my first contactees, and then headed down to Washington to create a political impression. And I knew what I needed to do, which was register a lobbyist. First one to do so. Washington Post came out and said, "Why did you do that?" Interviewed me, took a photo, and my career was launched.
So were you or were you not fascinated in the subject? I mean, you were fascinated in the subject, or, I mean, weren't you personally interested in learning more about it? Or what was the kind of impetus that made you so motivated to do it? You know, just because you just felt that that's something really important that needs to happen for society, you know, to end that truth embargo? Or
well, the interest was similar to a lot of people. I came of age. I became a teenager essentially in 1959, 1960. Okay, and this was the end of the 50s and beginning of the 60s and so forth. And this was a golden age at the time of sci-fi books. I mean, they were just coming out and they were fantastic. There had been sci-fi that, you know, going back in the early 1900s. We know about some of the early stuff, but it wasn't particularly impressive, and there weren't many writers. Okay, but starting in the 50s, they exploded. Why? Because of Roswell. All right. I didn't learn about Roswell until much later. I didn't know about it. The first thing that really got my attention on this issue was not Roswell. It was the Betty and Barney Hill case, which was abduction. So I noted that, but I'm reading Heinlein and all these great sci-fi books, and that's it, right? For me, it's fantastic. Nothing else compared to it. Not Shakespeare.
That's an odd entry point, you know, because the phenomenon in itself is very hard to believe, you know, coming from a mainstream worldview, and the abduction, you know, aspect of it, you know. I mean, I think with most people, you know, that's not their entry point, you know, because that's the kind of dimension of it, you know, that's just so much more implausible than, you know, the surface level things. But you were, yeah.
I'm a teenager. I'm 13. I don't have a major worldview. That's one of the reasons why you have to have a turnover, right? You just, you know, you can't live for 100, 200, 300 years because nothing would change. So you have this turnover, new generation, new viewpoint. So I didn't have an entrenched worldview. I'm 13. I'm reading, and what appeals to me is science fiction, which was high quality. Certainly, it was very good. But what I did not know is, why are all these science fiction books turning up? Why is there so much good stuff? Why are people writing? I never asked that question because I didn't know about Roswell. Okay, Roswell is what triggered, I believe, the golden age of sci-fi fiction. It also triggered the beginning of the Hollywood engagement of this issue with films of size, substantial. The early ones, like the Day the Earth Stood Still, and the others that you can easily think about. That was all happening because of Roswell. That whole thing was spreading slowly out into the public consciousness and subconsciousness. And people were really grooving on it. And so the writers started jumping in, and I'm reading the sci-fi. And then, right, as I get on, I said, when did I first find that out? I said, I knew about Betty Barney Hill in 1966. I forget about when I first learned about Roswell, but then that starts to come to me. So I'm realizing that we have this sci-fi representation of ETs and extraordinary stuff out in space, but it looks like there may be a reality to it that's here. And so that is kind of happening. And that just stays with me as I go through life, going to my 20s and 30s. I don't engage the issue. I don't join MUFON. I don't become a researcher, but I'm absorbing every sci-fi movie that comes out. I watch them all. I'm grooving on the sci-fi.
You aren't really wanting to, you know the truth, though. You know, you're sticking to the sci-fi. You're not wanting to know, you know, what's the real, you know, what's the reality of this. And
obviously, I think that's a fair statement. It's not that I suddenly, I want to know the truth. Be honest with you, I was just I was a military brat. Father was in the Navy, and this thing is happening, and I'm seeing some things about it. I'm assuming that the government's going to tell me the truth very soon. Right? In other words, I don't need to suddenly jump into this thing and start researching. Surely the government's researching it, and surely they're going to tell us about it pretty soon.
Yeah, gotcha.
But they didn't, right? And then you get involved in your life and all the other crises and stuff that happens, and you're moving forward, but it's kind of hanging there, right? There was this thing back in my mind was unresolved. What's going on? Why hasn't the government told us about this? But it's in the back. It's in the back. But it comes forward in 1995. It's in other words, I suddenly have to reassess everything in my life, and that thing is still there. I bring it forward, think about it, and realize that's still not resolved. It's 1995, right? Which is what? 1995 is like 48 years after Roswell, which I knew about by then. And so that's when it wasn't a question of wanting the truth. I realized you're going to have to go get the truth. And that's when the activist side of me kicked in. You put those two things together. Okay, you're an activist. That's your personality. That's the kind of stuff you were involved in back during the Vietnam War. Now why not apply that to this? Wasn't sure how. Went east. Worked 4 months spent time as a volunteer with John Mack's organization. But I had lived in and out of D.C. for my whole life. My mother's family goes back to the early 1930s. I knew D.C. very well. I had gotten involved in political perspective because of the previous movements, anti-war certainly. And it all just kind of came together. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, we need to know the truth. We need to go get it. Proving the issue and doing endless research isn't cut it. You could pile research up to the sky. The government would just ignore it. So you got to find a political solution. And I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I set out to do. And 29 years later, we're still trying to get that political solution that gives you a perspective of how difficult this is. But we're practically there. We've gotten most everything done that's needed to be done to get the political solution, except that the resistance to that is still not capitulated. I mean, they are still hanging in, holding out, sometimes rashly. So we haven't quite achieved the goal of getting the truth about this issue from our government.
All right. Well, let's maybe dive straight into that. Why would they ever? I mean, considering that there's just so much wrongdoing, I think, on their part. I mean, aside from just, the suppression of the fact that we're not alone. I mean, just the suppression of life-saving technologies, all of the unacknowledged special access programs, which who knows what they're up to, what kind of misdeeds, are going on there. Why would they ever be interested in opening the lid on all this, which could, vastly implicate them, down the road or immediately?
Well, first of all, the truth is pretty powerful. It's you just can't make it go away, make it evaporate. It's just there. It's just there constantly, and so you can suppress it, you can hide it, but you can't make it disappear. That's point number one. Point number two, we are a democratic republic. Well, still, but begin to wonder if that's going to last. And so the citizens of our country have a pretty substantial range of engagement of government and truth that other countries and other empires and societies have not had. And so trying to play that game is a lot harder in a democratic republic. You just can't take out thousands of people and shoot them all, right? Go round up all the journalists and kill them all and then hire your own people. There's just a list of things you can't do that other states could do. There was a time when if you just believed that the earth was not at the center of the universe, they put you on a stake and burnt you to death. Well, you can't do that now. And so it's harder to keep things under wraps. There's kind of an inevitability of coming forward. The U.S. government did some awful things in Vietnam, which they eventually fessed up to. They did some awful things in Iraq, which they fessed up to. So there isn't this guarantee that you can somehow simply not reveal truths. Particularly the bigger the truths, the more difficult it becomes. The third point: people die. This thing is now 78 years on. Everybody that was involved in the initial creation of the truth embargo between 47 and 52, with maybe you could almost say everybody, are dead. They're all dead. And so they don't have a problem. The people that have a problem are the ones that are more recently involved in maintaining the issue. But again, they're going to easily blame the others that are already dead. So there's that. There's just the fact that change is always happening, and we're always evolving, at least forward.
But all the new people, I mean, they're still guilty in the same fashion, right? As
Same fashion
came before. I mean, they're still suppressing the truth. They're still obfuscating. They're still marginalizing whistleblowers. They're still, discrediting. They're still pretty much engaged in all the same tactics. So why wouldn't they be just as culpable? They're still holding on to technologies that could change the world, that could liberate humanity. They're still guilty of hanging on to that and not.
All right, let me give you some other reasons why the truth embargo simply can't last forever or even much longer. First of all, there is a lot of things our government can't tell us. They can't tell you where all our nuclear submarines are. I mean, they could, but they'd go to jail for life. And there's just a vast list of national security related things that they cannot tell you about. And the idea that you could then criminalize them or say, well, you can't do that, the answer is quite simple. You don't have a right to know that under the law. There are laws that give them the ability to suppress that information for national security reasons. And most people accept that and know it and are not have a problem with it. Where they have a problem is when the things that they are maintaining secrecy about under, quote, the law, in the view of the citizen, the law doesn't cover it or it's not appropriately justified. All right. So now you're getting into kind of a semantic understanding of the law and so forth. And so the idea that, oh, well, this is terrible, it's awful. No, it's not. They're going to say it's national security. Now, assassinating people, which has happened in other countries for many reasons, that's a little different. And something like that would be a problem, and you'd have to deal with that. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the fundamental truths and actions regarding this issue under national security restrictions. And so, again, it's not like they're all going to be rounded up and criminalized. Not going to happen. But then there's another problem. There are X number of people in the government who are managing the truth embargo. It's not a lot. There's a lot of people that are, how would you say, involved in the things that they are managing, right? Doing the research and so forth. But the people that are managing the policy of embargo is a very limited number of people. So there's a lot of people that are not managers of the embargo, and a lot of people that know about this issue, they're not even involved in it. And so there are people that are going to come out that are constantly going to create a problem for those that are committed to not coming out. It's not a monolithic situation or policy. And so, again, there's a whole lot of reasons why maintaining the truth embargo is not perfect and cannot last indefinitely. And it's lasted probably longer than most people would have thought. So it's easy to simplify it. And I understand why people would want to do that. Good, bad, going to happen, not going to happen, and so forth. But it's not that simple. And because it's incredibly complicated, ultimately it resolves. Ultimately, something has to settle out. As long as we're a democratic republic. If we become a complete and total dictatorship under complete and total authority, and with the press are completely subjugated, and we literally can't move without having to show our papers, it's possible the truth embargo could extend decades longer. But we aren't that. We're probably not going to become that. And so the truth embargo's end is inevitable.
It's inevitable. You really think it's inevitable? There's no possible contingency where they just keep obfuscating, where they say they, just put out a very controlled narrative, but they're still keeping the bodies buried.
Absolutely not.
Couldn't they do that indefinitely? And
No,
and
they can't.
given that they've done it for 78 years,
Well,
it's to me it
if we
seems
were
like possible.
if the world we were living in now was the same world in 1947, yeah, okay. The truth of it and the phenomena has not changed, right? The ETs turn up, their craft turns up, evidence turns up. This has really not changed. The evidentiary process is maintained roughly the same. The kind of things they have to deal with is about the same. What has changed is the world has massively changed since 1948, and it's changed in our favor. It's changed in the favor of the truth. And what I mean by that, we've gone from a time in 1947, which there was black and white TV, 3 channels, 15 minutes of news, a lot of newspapers, but pretty much for people in that city, right? You had some news services, they were just getting underway. And in a span of 78 years, we have come to what? All right. You still have newspapers, but they also have websites. So every newspaper has a website. Those websites get magnitudes more engagement and views than the newspaper gets. And what goes out can be shared virtually at will anywhere in the world.
Right. And there's many points now of dissemination of information rather than, everything being under, one hat or one corporation, and especially given, the podcast world, the emergence of that. It just seems like it's possible, though, that they could give us a lot of things which they say are the truth, which kind of quells maybe many of our appetites for the truth, but which aren't really the truth. And they could still theoretically keep the real truths, sufficiently buried indefinitely, and it seems like that's kind of what they're doing, or I just get the impression. Don't you feel like, if you were a betting man, Steve, that given the problems, that they would have, telling the real truth, that they would surely, opt for a different path, one where, they're keeping the things that could implicate them, hidden. And I don't mean necessarily like the national security secrets, that would threaten national security, but don't you think it's more likely that they're going to give us a really, really watered down truth, rather than the real truth, and keep that going, or try to keep that going, and what's to stop them from, they seem competent at being able to do that, given what we've seen so far.
No. Okay. And competent? No. The truth embargo has been a fiasco. It's been one screw up after another, after another, after another. It's been an embarrassment and a disgrace. And they've been called out and called out and called out. The amount of evidence is now piled up, would fill rooms. So, and they can't make that go away. You just can't snap your fingers and all the evidence disappears. So that's just sitting there constantly. People have come forward, witnesses have come forward, spilled the beans. Documents have been found, and on and on and on. So what you're really responding to is not their unlimited power to keep this going on forever, which you could be an interpretation, which I respect. Not everybody has time to study the history of this like me. That's all I do, right? A history of it politically. Others have spent years studying the history of the phenomenon itself. Most people can't do that. So I get that. That's why we do what I do, and Richard Dolan and others do what they do, to try to inform people of really the history of this so they can have a proper perspective. And the proper perspective is that the evidence is overwhelming. The truth embargo is falling apart. It's lasted a long time, but then a lot of money was spent on maintaining it. And they had huge secrecy laws that helped support it, that weren't just there for the ET presence, but there for the fact that we've been in an existential Cold War nuclear arms race since 1945, really. But and it's unprecedented in all of human history, and it is the number one justification for any level of secrecy you want to come up with. because the answer to why in the hell are you doing that? Do you want to die in a nuclear war? If we don't do that, there's going to be a nuclear war. You're going to lose. Okay, fine, whatever. In no country, no empire has ever had such a ironclad basis to justify whatever the hell they do in the area of national security than this, right? We are just one screw up away from a nuclear annihilation, sending us back to the Stone Age. And they have milked that for 78 years, okay? But we understand that. We know, we get it. It's not a mystery anymore. And I could go on and on and on. Let me just say that the truth embargo is under attack. It's been shredded. It's been undermined. And this, quote, new world that you're talking about, which doesn't just include podcasts, it includes hundreds, if not billions, of websites, email, the ability to communicate at will globally, to be able to go to any site in the world practically, even if it's in another language, and immediately translate it, so that we have now a true neurosphere, a global brain that is able to interact at will. And you are a country trying to maintain a secret while the entire world can actually focus on your secret if it wants to at will anytime.
But isn't that under threat right now? You know, don't you think that there's been a lot of things that have happened in recent years that would make one think that, you know, that's in danger? You know, the free information, you know, that, I mean, look what happened, you know, with COVID, you know, and the suppression, the shutting down of channels, you know, if there's some kind of inconvenient truth, you know, I mean, there's definitely motivation that can emerge, you know, to clamp down on all this stuff.
Yeah. There is always an effort to manipulate information. All right. You had that wonderful book, 1984, Newspeak and all of that. So we understand that concept. What has changed now is that any government, virtually, even controlled states like Russia, so forth, Hungary, even China, they can do it. The trouble is everybody knows that they're doing it. Okay. It's like, okay, you want to shut down the media in a country so that you can get away with some nonsense? Fine. The whole world will know you shut it down within 24 hours, and immediately you're getting trolled on the internet. You know, you're getting parody videos about
COVID is a perfect example of that, you know, just how that just blew up in their faces.
Sure,
you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
so what's happening is that they are still trying to hang on to the truth embargo. And I understand why. But what is so different from the past is that we clearly understand it. We see it happening. We can talk about it. We can sort it out, and then we can come at it. Now, let me talk about something that just happened recently that will put this in perspective, I think, for you. The truth embargo, 78 years on, is one of the most extraordinary stories in human history. There needs to be a massive series. If somebody drops 20 million on me, I know the people to go to will make an unbelievable series like Civil War, might even get Ken Burns to do it, whatever the hell. It's an unbelievable story how the presence of advanced non-human technology and advanced non-humans in our world, all over the place, being seen all the time, with a massive effort to understand it going on all of the time. They managed to maintain a position for 78 years that none of it was real, none of it was happening. The emperors actually got a great new set of clothes and got away with it. It's an unbelievable history that is incredibly complex, involving a huge range of things and variables and factors that made it work, but it's just barely hanging on. Okay. One of the ways that they have maintained the truth embargo.
Uh-oh. Stephen, I don't know if you can hear us, but you've totally frozen.
Yeah, I think he froze on his end there. You know, I don't know what it's doing where you are, Jim, but here it's thunder and the lightning here.
Oh no, I got no weather here, but yeah, he's
see it maybe
frozen on my end.
Yeah, mine too. But you know, the things he's saying is correct. I mean, I I first I have this thing where disclosure. I mean, I really don't know what the big huge secret is. If everybody is out and the government says, "Oh yes, this is all true," I think that most people, because you had said, people would just turn the TV off or the radio or whatever. I think that it would probably be they wouldn't believe it anyway, even if the government come out, the president and everyone else come out and said, yes, we have this technology and this and that. Then it would be like, okay, yeah, now you're just pulling my leg.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people now, that tend to think, and have thought, given the recent, revelations and the videos put up by the military, the Tic Tac and Go Fast and etc., that this is some kind of psyop. They're so used to government psychological warfare that they interpret the alien stuff as a likely psyop. This is distraction. They're distracting us, from something else that we should be paying attention to. And okay,
Sorry,
we've got
guys.
you, Stephen.
Oh no, you're
That's
good.
all right.
You're good.
Hey, look, you may find this interesting. About once every 5 or 6 or 7 days, my computer just turns off. Right? There's no explanation for it. It's not battery. I've never been able to understand it. And with very rare exceptions, it always happens during a podcast. For what it's worth, just shuts down, right? And I turn it back on. So, can you remind me where I was when my computer shut down? Do you have some sense of it?
I don't know if I have a good sense of exactly where you were, because you were still kind of building that. Okay.
I'll start over because I know you're recording. So I want to give you something that's happened recently that is very emblematic of one of the hundreds of ways that they have techniques they've used to try to maintain the embargo on this issue so that it doesn't become formalized, certainly by the president. And here is what happens. So we're talking 1947 going forward. And you have periods when the issue is really advancing and the pressure is building. But the tides of history are also happening, major events and so forth. And what happens is that the tide of history will suddenly create some enormous events which are distracting and pushes the issue aside. And the government sees that and they step in to try to take advantage of that and get in a couple of shots, just like your opponent, your fighting opponent, lets their guard down, so you see an opportunity and pop your opponent with a couple of rights and a left.
Get a couple shots in what sense, you mean?
Exactly. So here is an excellent example. In 1969, all right, the issue was moving forward. There's been a lot that had happened. You had Project Blue Book. It'd been in place since 52, 17 years. They've got all of these sightings that are accumulating. You've got books coming out. There's a lot of pressure on the government, all right? But this is 1969. By 1969, we've just gone through 6-7 years of hell. You're talking about the Vietnam War. You're talking about the Vietnam War protest, violence, riots. You also had the Civil Rights Movement. It had been going on for 5 years. You just had the Civil Rights Act passed, and then you just had the voting rights passed. The 60s was something else. People were incredibly distracted. The issue was being pushed aside, and they made a move. What did they do? They saw an opportunity. So they got Edward Condon to author this report out of the University of Colorado called the Condon Report, basically saying there's really nothing to this. We've looked at it thoroughly. There's no evidence. They used that report to shut down Blue Book, which took that off the table. Big help for them. And then they also moved to destroy NICAP, which was the most significant entity organization in the field with thousands of members, many scientists, engineers, and so forth. But there were publicly known CIA people on the board, which is kind of cool. And they then moved to shut down the board. They shut down the organization, threw Keogh out, and basically destroyed NICAP. This is a perfect example of taking advantage of a weakness at that point. Now, the issue starts to come back to life around 78. And as you go from 78 forward, it's picking up speed. It's starting to get more attention. There's things happening. And then it really gets going in the early days of the Clinton administration. All right. When the first real activism, in a sense, starts to happen. And there's an effort to try to get the Clinton administration to bring the files out.
Is this Stephen Greer's efforts?
Well, Stephen Greer was part of that, absolutely, but there were others involved. Lawrence Rockefeller was funding it. The Human Potential Foundation was involved. They had other researchers involved, including John Mack, and so there was a lot going on. But the Clinton administration got to be incredibly tumultuous. It was scandals and scandals upon scandals, some of which was being concocted, some of it was real. And so it really weakened the administration. And so they started to make some strong moves to change the narrative. And as a result, in 1997, they really made an effort to try to undermine the situation with some rather extraordinary and ridiculous maneuvers, right? They were dealing with Corso's book. They were dealing with Stephen Schiff's efforts to get the Roswell records. And then you had the coming 50th anniversary of Roswell, 1997, with tens of thousands, maybe even 100,000 people projected to show up. And so they made a strong move at that point by holding a press conference at the Pentagon, in which they reinforced the mogul balloon deal and then brought in the crash test dummies to explain the bodies. It was a total fiasco. It was a joke. Everybody, the journalists were laughing. But this was a maneuver that they felt they could do. Now we get to the modern era, the real modern era of this issue, which takes off in 2017. And what has happened between 2017 and 2020, late 2024, early 2025, is more substantive, more significant than everything that had happened previously in the previous 70 years, going back to 47. We are just accelerating towards disclosure with one unprecedented development after another. The first legislation, the first hearing since 1968, followed by another hearing and a briefing and another hearing and another hearing. 4 pieces of legislation passed, right? Each one more powerful than the other. Witnesses coming forward. The first witnesses testifying under oath that had national security background, and on and on. This thing is moving forward like a juggernaut, okay? But the tides of history are also happening. And so what happens as we're approaching the modern time? You have, it begins in 2017, right, as well. You have the beginning of what is possibly the most extraordinary, tumultuous political time in American history, set perhaps prior to the Civil War. And so we have political unrest and confusion.
And Trump administration and
whatever. It's like it's unprecedented. Okay. That is taking place. But then extraordinary events overseas. You've got you've got, of course, the pandemic, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, right? Followed by more pandemic, followed by the terrorist attack in October 2 years ago, followed by the war with Gaza, right? Followed by more Ukrainian developments. And then, of course, recently, beginning of a war, essentially a war starts with Iran. This stuff is happening so fast you can't keep up with it. At the same time, the political upheaval is actually escalating. And so the issue is being pushed aside, in spite of the fact it's more robust than it's ever been. It's pushed to the side, and so boom, they make another move. What did they do? Right?
What did they do?
They contacted the New York Times and said, "Do you want a story? We've got insiders happy to talk with you. There's scientists willing to talk to you. Interested?" And the Wall Street Journal says, "Well, of course we are." And so they assigned 2 national security reporters, Joel Sheckman and Aruna Viswanathan, to go and do the story. And they interview with quite a few people, but they only talked to 2 people in the field that I'm aware of, me and Bob Salas. right? Now, I know a lot about this because I actually met with Joel Sheckman 3 months before this story came out on June the 6th. And so out of nowhere, boom, the Wall Street Journal slams down a story on June the 6th, which is so ridiculous, so absurd, that it even rivals the crash test dummies of 1997, only worse in many respects.
Because how could that possibly account for the entire phenomenon and everything, that has come out? There's just no way that, simply a government program, to mislead, to cover up weapons programs. There's just no way that can account for, even 5% of, what's been witnessed, and the phenomena and all of the insiders and whistleblowers and, just all of it. Yeah. I mean, it just seems just extremely ridiculous that could sell,
Yeah, but they did it, didn't they? And it is more ridiculous than the crash test dummy. The crash test dummy was straightforward. People said they saw these 4-foot grays, but no, what in 47 and about that time, but no, what they saw were crash test dummies, 6-foot, guys in Air Force uniforms that were dropped in order to test equipment and whatever, and they mistook those 6-foot crash test dummies for the 4-foot grays. And because the crash test dummies weren't dropped until 52, there was a memory time compression thing. That's what they put forward at that press conference in July 1997, which was ridiculous. This is more ridiculous than that, because what people know, the research that's available, the ability to engage this issue and study it, is way past where it was in 1997. And they put out a story that essentially almost everything of importance, going back as far as you want to go, was in fact us. We were creating all of these things and putting up this and that, and in order to confuse you, because we didn't want you to know about our top secret research. And they expected us to believe it. Of course, we don't believe it, but they put that out. But they did something else, which was clearly pushback. And this is more complicated, but I'll be quick. Over the last recent year, approximately a year, finally, after 34 years of trying, the potential for the nuclear shutdown witnesses to testify under oath was becoming very real. A lot of this is a result of my work. I had educated and provided witness statements to 26 of the key House and Senate Intel Committee offices. Bob Salas had actually interviewed one of the shutdown witnesses with Nancy Mace, and it was clear that the shutdown witnesses, of which there are a number still alive, most are dead, but there are a number still alive, most prominently Salas, Shindeli, and Jameson, and Barbara Jacobs, were very likely very soon going to testify under oath in front of one of the House committees. In fact, Mace said she wanted them. And so it was fully in play, and they knew this. I've been all over this issue and up on the Hill. They knew it. And the last thing that the truth embargo managers want is SAC-based officers that were present when our missiles were shut down while a craft, very large craft, is hovering directly over the gate and being seen by all the security guys up top testifying under oath. And so in a last-ditch effort to prevent it, taking advantage of this current distraction, they interviewed Bob Salas. I gave Sheckman the contact information. He's the only witness they interviewed. They interviewed Bob Salas because they intended to do a hit piece on the shutdown, and the piece basically said that the shutdown of the nuclear weapons at Malmstrom, without getting into the fact that it also shut down at Minot, there were other shutdowns, including the Soviet Union, was in fact us. That it was an EMP test of the missiles to see if an EMP event, an enemy EMP event, could shut them down, and that they built a structure and they did it. It's complete nonsense. It's the most absurd. It's worse than the crash test dummies. It's already been savaged by 6 or 7 people. Bob Salas sent an article repudiating the whole damn thing, and the Wall Street Journal, to its total disgrace, refused to publish it. But they actually did that, right? We shut down the missiles. One of the people who was on the investigation team in the 60s to study and try to figure out what happened to be John Alexander, who I know and have known for some time. And he immediately contacted me and said, of course, we looked at EMP and ruled it out. There was no way a, quote, EMP event could have done that. Certainly not one created by our own government. So this...
And it would have had a broad effect, wouldn't it? I mean, it would have knocked out, wasn't it very selective, like they shut down, the silos, everything didn't shut down, like the power didn't go out, and wouldn't an EMP, I mean, I don't know exactly all the details of these kind of weapons, but maybe you would think it would be, a much more broad scale effect, rather than just on the
EMP was not much of a thing back then. And as far as EMP weapons, I don't know. The point is, that's just one of about 20 reasons why it was ridiculous and absurd. But they did it. And this tells me a lot. All right. So this was a almost, given the circumstances, an act of desperation. They said, I got an opening here. I got to take advantage of it. Let's put these articles out, which is a total disgrace to the Wall Street Journal, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, and he could give a crap about whether he's disgraced or not. He could care less about the American people, less about the truth, less about anything. He didn't care whether he got anything from it. I don't know. He's already a multi-billionaire. The point is that in terms of the paper itself, it's an unbelievable disgrace, and also a disgrace for the two authors, Sheckman and Vishwanathan, who I don't necessarily think were in any way culpable. They were told to do a story. They were fed a complete load of crap by the Department of Defense and notable scientists, and they wrote the story. Now, I would hope that if they figure out they were taken for a ride, that they might come forward and say, wait a minute, but that is a tough decision and only they can make that. But it's ridiculous. But it gives you an idea not of how effective they are in maintaining the truth embargo. It's how desperate they are to maintain it. They are losing and they know it. They bought themselves a little bit of time here, but it won't last very long. However, the situation in Israel and Iran and in the Ukraine and the political situation in the United States still remains at DEFCON 1 practically. And so it will buy them some time, but I assure you, it's not going to work. We will get disclosure. They may have put it for us another year or two. However, the fact is, enough has been accomplished that the president of the United States, whoever that president is, we know who the president is now, doesn't have any real barrier to coming forward and just doing it and just saying, hey, there's an ET presence here. Nobody's going to go, oh, wow, I had no idea. And so the political risk is now down. The legacy, historical legacy is clearly well understood. The president that does that, whether it's Putin, Xi Jinping, or Trump, will go down in history. They'll build statues to him, get a Nobel Peace Prize, God knows what else. So the situation is still such that a head of state could do it tomorrow. Will this maneuver prevent that? I don't know. All I know is right now, the DOD has made an ass of itself. Whoever these scientists are have made asses of themselves. They've really embarrassed the administration. They disgraced the Wall Street Journal, which is something they might have gotten away with in 1960 or 70, but they're not going to get away with it now.
Okay. What I'm still just struggling with is, so we definitely have like this extremely entrenched power structure, right? That has grown from the technologies that they've had, the propulsion technologies, the free energy technologies, and God knows what else, technologies they've had since maybe the 50s or a really, really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And we have all of these, unacknowledged special access programs, which don't they essentially kind of constitute a kind of shadow government? This massive power structure that relies upon that secrecy. And because, they're so vested in that, that they're so vested in all of this, I mean, they're not just going to relinquish that power. They're going to do everything they can possibly do. That can't be, the Wall Street Journal article can't be their primary weapon. I seriously wonder, and I know I don't think you subscribe to this, that these events, which take disclosure off track, these world events, given, the implications of what will happen to this entrenched power structure if it becomes out in the open, that maybe these events could be, not organic, and there is, sort of major sort of cards they're playing, in order to sort of keep this stuff suppressed. You don't ever entertain that, there's more beneath the waterline that could be going on as far as keeping the lid on all of this.
I dissuade others from that view. I don't have that view. The view, when you're involved in an issue, it becomes your whole raison d'etre, which I fully understand. It's my life. It's what I do. It's easy to try to build everything around it. No, the world is very complicated. A lot going on. I don't think any of the things that we're seeing now are in any way happening because of the need to keep the truth embargo, but they certainly can affect it. And get to your larger point. Yeah, theoretically, those that are absolutely committed that we do not have the right to know, the need to know, or can handle the truth of this matter, actually committed to that, will do anything possible to keep the status quo. And there are those who want to keep the status quo, not because of that, but because they just don't want to have to deal with it, or they don't want to be embarrassed, or they just don't care. There's a range of reasons why someone inside the secret empire, as I like to call it, would want to keep this status quo on this issue. What's changed is the list of possible things they can do is shrinking. They would do anything possible, okay, except the number of possible things is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. They have less cards to play, less pieces on the chessboard, and that's another reason why ultimately they will lose.
So they know that they've got to reveal the truth, but they're not just gonna, let go of the reins of that power. They're gonna try to hold on to that power. And what do you think about just that dynamic?
What is the power you're referring to? What power are you talking about? Can you be
well, I'm talking about essentially just the what I just described. Just the over the 78 years, or since they've had the technology, these propulsion systems, these free energy. I think, and I'm sure Stephen Greer, thinks the same. That there's just a massive sort of apparatus, the military-industrial complex, that has really been ramped up, given the existence of those technologies. And there's no congressional oversight over this. If there would be congressional oversight over it, it would not be able to be authorized, and that would essentially amount to, I think, a loss of their power. A loss of their free reign. To do what they've been doing, whatever they've been doing. With in these programs and with the technologies that they have.
All right, let's rephrase the language. What they have is what you call power, I would likely call convenience. In other words, we have assigned to our military intelligence complex the power, the authorization to defend us against all foreign enemies. All right. And we've given them that power to do that. So exercising that power is one thing. But the real question is, how much will the public know about the exercising of that power? And that is a national security matter. For instance, we know that we have given them the power to spend billions of dollars to build nuclear submarine. We also know that we've given them the power to maintain an enormous amount of secrecy about that technology, where they are at any given time, what they're capable of doing, and so forth. And we totally respect that as well. Okay. So the idea that they're able to conduct our national security in and of itself does not lead to what we'll call excesses or a serious existential problem or a problem for the country. Now, let me bring up the camera again. I kind of lost it here. It's got to be here somewhere.
Are you essentially saying that you don't think that there has been excesses, or no?
Well, there has been abuse of secrecy, without question. I need to get my camera back up here. Just take a second.
Yeah,
I got to do this. Oh, I know where it is. Okay, here we go. There we go. Okay. There has been abuses of power, abuses of secrecy, and everybody understands that. And we don't want that. And so, for instance, when the government, when the politicians deliberately lied about certain events during the Vietnam ramp up that allowed them to then launch a full-scale war, that was abuse of power. It was abuse of truth, right? And those that knew otherwise, who wouldn't come forward, was abuse of secrecy. So this is not extraordinary. What's truly extraordinary is that it's one thing to lie about an event that gets you into a war. Lies done, war goes on, somebody needs to apologize, and so forth. And this has happened on a number of occasions. What is unique about what we're dealing with is that in order to maintain the truth embargo, they had to lie about this every day of every week and month and every year. They've had to lie every day for 78 years. Because this is a truth that's being masked every day, and it's under assault from many directions. And so they have to keep lying about it. And so it's a 78 year, which makes it systemic, much more corrosive and damaging. Is it a product of the deep state? I don't know what deep state means. Is it a project of the national security complex? Yes, it is. Okay. Have people within the national security complex who operated under extraordinary secrecy come forward? Yeah, they have. There's a number of them. I can start listing them if you want, but these are people that were part of that world, that secret world where the secrecy and it was being abused, that have actually come forward and say, yeah, that's what was going on, right? I was part of that. I didn't say anything. They're coming forward as well. This was not happening in the 40s, 50s, or 60s by and large. It's happening now. Some of them are even coming forward and saying, yeah, I was part of the secret empire. I was part of the truth embargo. I'm coming forward now. And by the way, I'm a contactee. Again, the truth embargo is diminishing at the same time. The pressure on it, the truth activist movement, disclosure activist movement is getting stronger, broader. And so you have this imbalance occurring in which at some point it's over. Now, predicting when it's going to be over is not easy. I take that on. I try to predict how things are going. I tend to lean towards optimism. There have been times when I have been overly optimistic, times when I've been maybe overly pessimistic, but not too often. I try to put it in perspective. And if things are going to hell on the issue, I say so. And I'm saying it right now. We have had a setback. They have had a successful pushback that's going to slow things down. It's going to give other newspapers a license to kind of step back on coverage, which they have. The number of articles has fallen way, way down because I track them all the ones that are important. It's going to give the various skeptics that now flourish. Well, I say flourish, but are now they pretty much their arena is social media, right? Not so much articles in newspapers, though the New York Post tends to write a few, but it gives them a license to come out to play and pushes things back a little bit. And I'm acknowledging that. So it's a little more likely that the truth embargo is going to hang on for longer than I would like. But I understand the circumstances now are different in this regard. Unlike almost any time in history, we are at a point where the truth embargo could end tomorrow appropriately. This wasn't the case in 1952 or 69 or even under the Clinton administration. But now it's appropriate. And the reason for that is an enormous effort over the last 7 years by a great number of people using every aspect of the new media and social media and everything else has been undertaken to build the platform that the president could stand on. Now, what do I mean by that? If there isn't a platform to stand on, the president just walks out in the East Room and says, there's ETs here. Sorry, we didn't tell you sooner, and walks back down the cross hall, chaos ensues. All hell is breaking loose. It's a mess. It's totally irresponsible. But if there has been legislation, if there has been hearings, if the Congress has been informed and briefed, if the public is much more up to speed, if there have been thousands of articles, which is exactly what has happened in the last 7 years, that builds a platform that the president can walk out, step up on and say, there's non-human tech and non-human engagement here in our world. And you want to know more, and you're gonna learn more, and most people are going to say, "Oh, okay, that's very good. Thank you. It's about time you told us." That platform is now built, therefore it could happen tomorrow, and that is what's just different, way different from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and even the early aughts. And so, at this point, there is no fundamental barrier to disclosure except whatever obstacles that the military intelligence complex, whether it's the Pentagon or whether it's the defense contractors, can kind of throw out. It's like those strips that they throw out in front of cars to try to stop some police chase, but they never work. The car just goes around them. That's kind of where things are at. I understand that. Most citizens do not. They're thinking, oh my God, we're never going to get the truth. When in fact, I'm aware that what they're doing now is only just going to delay things a little bit. It cannot stop the ultimate outcome.
Todd, do you have any questions about that?
No, I'm sorry. I don't have any questions about that. But I do have this question.
Yes. Way
back in the day, when World of Worlds was on the radio. and that got people, they really believed that something was happening. Now, my thing is this: if the government would come out and say, okay, we have UFOs and all this and that, do you think it would cause a mass panic like in that movie? Or do you think people are in that radio show? Because people, I think there was one person killed themselves and people were being trampled and everything else from the hysteria of the whole thing. But do you think that people would become like that? Or do you think that people would say, we don't believe you now. You've told us so much stuff that now we don't know what to believe? Or do you think that's the whole agenda of the government? They don't want you to know anything, so they don't want you to believe anything.
Well, the ones that don't want us to know, and then there's ones that do want us to know. And right now, the ones that do want us to know are winning. All right, look, if you research the Halloween broadcast by Orson Welles, what you will discover is the amount of panic was way less than was projected. It was way overstated. It was kind of a cool thing, and it was as far as news, it was like, oh yeah, people were panicked. The government picked up on that and used it later on because it's one of countless tools to try to maintain the truth embargo to those that are arguing against it inside. Oh, do you know what happened to the Orson Welles broadcast? Hundreds and thousands of people died. They jumped off of bridges and killed themselves and whatever. No, it's all crap. It's nonsense. It was an interesting event. It kind of got people's attention. And that's about it. So, and there is no comparison to that little podcast and what's going on now. It's hard to find anybody on the planet that doesn't know what extraterrestrial means or UFO means. you got to go deep into the Amazon jungle, right? So the idea of ETs and UFOs and even space is ubiquitous. Movies about ETs and flying around in space make billions of dollars.
Yes.
They're the most successful movies on the planet. There have been, I estimate, at least 600 sci-fi movies just that have ETs in them, and God knows how many others that don't have ETs in them. It's ubiquitous. It's saturated the world. Is that 1930? What was it? 1937? Whatever it was.
Yeah.
No, it's not even close. And the level of knowledge and education. It's so, but it was one of those little things they used to try to help convince people, don't say anything. Then Margaret Mead stepped in, right? And so she did some study of cargo cults post World War II that showed that very basic islanders with almost no access to the outside world suddenly had planes landing on their island as part of the war. And when the planes left, they were very confused. And so they built little shrines to the planes they thought were like gods, hoping they will come back. Guess what? The 1960s report, the Brookings report, which was, again, it was essentially another little tool to try to keep the inside people in control and not spill the beans, calls on that, brings that up about how the cargo cults that Mead investigated is another example of why, my God, people will think they're gods and they'll start making shrines to them and everything else. The one thing that most characterizes the truth embargo, it's a 78-year, rather pathetic effort on the government to insult the intelligence of the entire human race. It's that awful. It will be looked on with amusement for decades, if not centuries, if not millennia, is one of the most grotesque, bizarre, stupid efforts on the part of civilized society to try to stop the tide of history, right? It will be a laughing stock. Nobody associated with it is going to have a good outcome historically, right? In other words, they don't really want to read the reviews on this down the line. They don't want to read the historians' take on this because it's not going to be a good look. Everybody involved in it, by and large, is going to take a hit because it's just so screwed up, so bizarre, stupid. However, in the modern era, there's a certain justification, primarily because of the nuclear arms race. I get that. But if we ever get past the nuclear arms, history will look back and say, oh, you sad, sad, pathetic people. Really? You were doing this while the world was getting to 8 billion people and hundreds of millions were starving to death and living in filth, and wars were taking place, stupid wars. You were like clinging to this. So it's not going to go well for them. And that's the way I'll look at it. And that's the way history is going to look at it. And so I just don't have much respect for it, certainly in the modern era. I don't invest in it. I'm not impressed by it. And every day, fewer and fewer people are impressed by the program, the policy, the people behind it, what their thinking is, how they're going about maintaining it. It's becoming a running joke. And that's not something I would want to be attached to if I was a serious person working for the government trying to defend my country. I don't want to be seen as a joke. I don't want my policies to be seen as a joke, but that's where it is right now. And the disclosure movement is trying to help them get out of that, to get them past that. And we're happy to help.
Is there a point at which systemic lying becomes treasonous? Not just inconvenient or embarrassing, but morally and legally indefensible.
A great deal of the activities and policies of the last 78 years could easily fall into that genre if it weren't for the nuclear arms race, which we now take for granted. Yeah, there's a nuclear arms race. What are you going to do? I mean, that's what people. I get that. Why would you want to fret over it 24 hours a day? It's going to make your life miserable. But if you step back and look at the long, history of the human race, particularly the last 10,000 years, and what we've gone through, and then you look at the nuclear arms race, right, that starts in basically 47, 48, but really in 45. There's no comparison to it in history. It's off the charts. It's hard to even grasp. We got to a point where we could build weapons like this. We eventually ended up with at the peak 86,000 of them. We could launch them from space, from the ocean, from movable platforms, from silos. We could deliver them in tactical shells. We literally invented a way to take the entire planet back to the Stone Age. And then we invested in it trillions and trillions of dollars and threatened each other over it for 70 years. And unless you're older than 78, you've never lived a second in a world that wasn't involved in a nuclear arms race. And so we don't know how to put it in perspective. I want to help there. Okay. It's unprecedented. It's almost impossible to grasp. And so the fact that nuclear arms race was used as a national security cover for a vast range of policies and actions and the expenditure of untold trillions of money that would have fed, clothed, and housed an awful lot of people, built an awful lot of power plants and water plants and everything else to make life a lot easier on this planet. If you're struggling with understanding why, you just have to put in perspective this nuclear arms race that justified almost anything. Now, and that is why in my world, I created a metaphor which has dominated my work since 1999, I think. And that's this. It turns out, after all the strum and drang and everything, and all those 11 years of history, 1,000 years of history, the human race arrives at a point right around, 1948, 1949, where the future of our civilization hangs on two outcomes. One is nuclear war, which we assigned a metaphor to in 47 called the Doomsday Clock, which was put together by the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, the people that built the damn bomb, to try to say, we built this bomb, we're really afraid we're going to use it, and so we're going to create this Doomsday Clock to keep you informed of whether we're getting close to using it or not. It's still around. It's been around and promoted for the last 78 years, and currently is closer to midnight than it's ever been. Midnight is nuclear war. But there is another clock, which I take full credit for, that I invented in 1998, 1999, called the Paradigm Clock. And I actually promoted it, and it's up. I had it on my website. It's kind of up on a shelf now. But the Paradigm Clock had a different midnight. It was disclosure, the confirmation of the extraterrestrial presence by heads of state of nations, worldwide disclosure of the ET presence, the Paradigm Clock. And it still exists, but I don't promote it much, and I don't keep tabs on it. But this is the metaphor, which I've pounded at for years. Which clock strikes first, nuclear war or the Paradigm Clock? Confirmation of the extraterrestrial presence of the launching of nuclear weapons in war. Which one strikes first? And there is this asymmetry to this metaphor, that if nuclear war strikes first, it doesn't matter whether the Paradigm Clock makes midnight or not. It just doesn't matter. We're screwed. Okay, whether the ETs hang around, I don't know. If I were them, I wouldn't. I'd go away, come back in 1,000 years and see where we're at. But if the Paradigm Clock strikes first, there is a realistic and logical basis to believe that it might be the one thing that could ultimately prevent the Doomsday Clock from hitting midnight and that nuclear war from taking place. Because absent that, I don't think a nuclear war can be avoided. I think we're headed straight for it. But at the same time, we're also heading towards disclosure of ET presence.
Why do you think it will preclude the midnight on the Doomsday Clock? Because people will become united, knowing that we're not alone, or why do you think this prevents nuclear apocalypse?
It is a complicated It's not a simple explanation. People coming united, that's fine, but that's way too simple. Ronald Reagan used a version of that. He said if we had an actual threat from extraterrestrials, we would all come together, right? And put our differences aside in order to save ourselves from the extraterrestrial. Incredibly simple and bogus, because if we had an extraterrestrial threat, it wouldn't matter if we came together. We'd only come together for a short while, and then they would completely annihilate us. There wouldn't be a human within, anywhere on the planet. They could get rid of everything. Hell, they could get rid of all life, turn themselves into a smoldering rock. So it was simple. But the other approach to it, which is, what if there is an extraterrestrial presence and we learn about that? That's not a threat, but simply here.
Mm-hmm.
What happens the easiest way to explain it is that you have, and this is where Danny Sheen, of course, is very, very vocal about, you have what is called a worldview change. Now, we've had worldview changes over the millennia, but we've never had one of this magnitude in the modern era. For instance, back in the 1300s, you had a situation where we had a worldview change that was a big deal for some people, certainly a big deal for the religion. We went from an Earth-centered universe to a sun-centered universe, and this was a big deal in a lot of ways, but nothing compared to what the ET confirmation will be. But it did affect a lot of people, and their worldview had to change, and as a result, you saw some changes then unfold over a long period of time, okay, in science and other things, and that was a worldview change. We had a worldview change of some substance when relativity emerged in the early 1900s. We had to rethink time and space. Fine. And there have been other worldview changes, pretty much of a religious origin. For instance, the coming of Jesus Christ, or at least the historical event that led to the interpretation of that event as a religious event, had a significant worldview change on a lot of people and altered the course of history over a substantial period of time, without question. And so people get that. And there have been others, okay? Worldview changes come from dramatic changes in our understanding or events that causes a lot of people to rethink things. What we're looking at and facing is, or maybe going to experience, will be the most profound worldview change of all time. Nothing compares to it. Nothing in history even is a close second to what we're about to experience. Now, why do I say that? If you measure worldview change, is how much the degree of worldview change amongst the most number of people in the shortest amount of time. Nothing comes close to this. In other words, confirmation of the extraterrestrial presence will happen on Monday. And by Tuesday morning, the worldview change of billions of people, it may take a month before it's the entire 8 billion, but whatever, billions of people starts to change.
In what ways specifically do they change immediately? Would it constitute this kind of collective humbling because we're not the apex predator, or in what ways do you think it would change abruptly?
Very big, long books will be written by every manner of research, whether it's political science, whether it's philosophy, certainly pure science is going to be written to try to describe what's going to happen in the months and years after disclosure, confirmation of ET presence.
Yeah.
But just to pick a few things. One, the simple truth that we're not alone, right? Not alone. You may say, well, that's out there. Everybody kind of knows, are we alone, not alone? Well, it's one thing to speculate about being alone or not alone. It's another thing to have confirmation you're not alone. Finding some microbes in the atmosphere of a star 50 light years away means that there's other life in the universe, but that doesn't mean there's sentient life in the universe, or even more so, technological, advanced sentient life. We will, like that, learn that there is other life in the universe, which instantly translate to the universe is loaded with life. So it's all over the friggin' place. But There's sentient technological life out there that's not us, which also means, to a lesser degree, there is God knows how many technological civilizations involving various types of beings that are able to build computers and study science, whatever, throughout the galaxy. So suddenly we are not alone. And that is a very profound thing, right? There's more to this world than just us, and we may learn about it pretty soon. That's going to be exciting. It's a very forward-looking thing. Oh my God, all 8 billion people are thinking, well, wait a minute, how are we going to find out who is out there? Are the ETs going to tell us stuff? Are we going to learn that there's even more entities out there? There is a whole expansive future of information ahead of us that we could learn about. Now, we may not learn about it in our lifetime, but our kids can learn about it. And so there is a future, right? Also, it's confirmation for many people, not everyone, that it is possible to master science and relativity and atomic physics and quantum physics that allows you to build unbelievably destructive weapons and survive it and not destroy yourself, because obviously they did. And that's a kind of a uplifting thing. Maybe we can get through this disaster.
Right.
All right. There's also the humbling factor. Yeah. Stop being so impressed with yourself, right? If you're a psychopathic dictator, right? They just keep turning up. We can't stop it. All right. That think that you are God's gift to the world and that you are incredibly powerful and you're going to make history. Suddenly you're going to realize, everything I've done or could do, it's really not that big a deal. And maybe I should step back a little bit and not be so impressed with myself. Or in a more general sense, take ourselves a little less seriously, see ourselves as part of a larger thing, and try to just focus on doing the best we can. Right? Instead of trying to set records that we will never probably be able to set, and just become part of a larger whole. There is that. All right. And I could go on. These things, some small, some large, will eventually amalgamate into a change in worldview. Amongst some people, it'll be barely measurable. On others, it will be kind of interesting, and in others it will be profound, but nobody will escape it unless you're in a coma, right? Or you live in a cave and never come out. Nobody will escape a worldview change. It's just a question of to what degree it will happen. And a change of worldview thus opens up a whole new list of potential actions, potential policies, and decisions that were not available prior to the worldview change. And it is in those new perspectives and possible actions that the solutions to our worst problems emerge. And thus, if we choose to act on those solutions, suddenly the whole world is going in a different direction. And hopefully it is away from vast nuclear armaments, war as diplomacy by other means. Destruction is literally a fundamental aspect of human nature. Away from that to where obviously a lot of non-human civilizations out there have managed to get to. That is a simple way of saying what other authors 100 years from now will spend 10,000 pages trying to explain to you.
Mm-hmm. Stephen, what is the psychological implications for those that are religious to finding out that other beings exist? And I hate to bring up religion, but in the Bible, it says, there's God created man in his own image. And now we're finding out that we have another being out there, way, way far away, but they come to visit now and again. What is the implications that would happen to those that are really religious?
Well, let's say if ETs had suddenly come down en masse in the early years of Christianity, it would have definitely altered that. It would have gone, God knows what directions would have gone. I don't know. When ETs came down in ancient times, which I believe they did,
Sure.
Can't prove it, but there's enough circumstantial evidence to make it a very legitimate possibility. Some of the evidence is bogus, but some of it I think is legit. Apparently, based upon the circumstantial evidence that we have been able to garnish through a lot of aggressive archaeology that pissed off most of the traditional archaeologists, but I don't care, seems to indicate that whenever they came down in ancient times, they were immediately viewed as gods. Okay, gods, right? And so if you look at the ancient religions, right, you see the further back you go, you see less Messiah and more gods from the sky hanging out on the ground. And we got through that, but then things went off in a different direction, and we started to develop the Messianic religions, which are interesting. And there were reasons for that. In general, the overall reason from religion in general, whatever the religion, is to make life as a sentient human more bearable. Because if you live long enough, you come to an understanding that I think any person who lives long enough comes to, and that is being a living sentient being is a bitch. It is not easy. It is brutal. It is pain, suffering, up, down, confusion, every manner of anxiety. No animal experiences what we're experiencing, right? Pick an animal, I don't care which one. Pretty much life is cool. You live, something bad happens, and you die. That's it. Being a sentient human is awful. The amount of pain you can suffer, the variety of pain you can suffer, physical, emotional, whatever. It's hell. And it's not the same hell for everybody. But we know from experience that even the richest people on the planet can lead lives so awful, they blow their brains out. And so it's not easy being human. And so religion became more and more about trying to find and feel, or at least to build structures that make it easier to deal with just being a living human being, dealing with suffering, pain, deprivation, whatever. And so when you talk about ETs suddenly dropping into that picture, exactly how does knowing there is other sentient beings, even ones that are visiting us, suddenly make it more difficult to be a human, make it more difficult to deal with the pain and suffering that we have, right? Is it somebody say, well, look, if you believe in a Messiah, if you believe in a heaven that you will go to after you die, it'll be paradise for eternity, which is losing more and more cachet with every passing century. I assure you, it's not on the way up, it's on the way down. But let's say you're really invested in that and the ETs come down. Does that mean there's no heaven? No, not at all, right? Maybe because a religious figure of ancient times said there's a heaven doesn't mean there's not a heaven. It just means that person is saying that, right? So the ETs could come down and say there's no heaven. Why should you believe it? It's just so much more complicated than people want to invest the time to understand. But the simplest way to put it has been already put out there by the Catholic Church, which is the one faith, Christianity, by and large, is the one faith that might struggle, depending upon which component of this Christianity you're talking about. And when you get down to the very hyper-conservative evangelical Christians, which make up a very small percentage of Christianity, you do find the potential for a little more anxiety. But the massive Catholic Church, with its 1.53 billion people, has made it quite clear, if there are extraterrestrials in this universe, including ones hanging out down here, that simply means that God's creation is even more profound than we could have imagined. And therefore, rejoice in God's even more profound creation. That pretty much sums up where this is going to go when ETs come down here. But let me tell you, the governments, that particularly the United States government, has invested a lot into scaring the shit out of people over the religious implications. They will shove that out the door anytime they can. Why? Because it helps to keep people from engaging the issue. It helps to keep people inside government, holding the line, right? I think that people should know the truth. Do you realize, sir, that will undermine religion, and you're a devout Christian? How can you say that? Oh my God, I hadn't thought of it. The
And
U.S.
it's control. It's a lot of control.
It's a control factor. The U.S. government has used every trick in the book to keep this truth embargo alive. Every trick in the book. Tricks you couldn't even use on other issues. And that's why it's 78 years on, even though we had a crash vehicle, actually multiple crash vehicles and bodies in the late 40s. And that every single president since then has known they're here. And probably every single major head of state of the major countries, particularly the nuclear powers, have known they're here. It's still been embargoed because they have used every conceivable thing they could do to maintain it. But they're still losing. They're running out of runway, and it's almost over. And addressing all the things that they were able to be successful at 10 years ago, 100 years ago, isn't going to change that. It's over. It's just a matter of turning over. They just need to turn over their king, admit defeat, and go have a Subway sandwich or something. I know that sounds kind of trivial. It sounds dismissive, but at one level, in one sense, it is that exact way. I've said it this way as well. The government has already lost on this matter. They just don't know it yet, and so they're continuing on. Right? There's a lot of metaphors for that. All right, but there are examples of this in life where people have really lost, but they just keep going anyway because they don't know how to stop. I get it. But that, I think, sums it up. At least it sums it up pretty well for me.
So lingering on the societal impact, what are the implications going to be of not just finding out that extraterrestrials exist and that we're not alone and that there's other advanced civilizations out there, but what would the implications be of discovering that they're here on the planet in a kind of permanent or semi-permanent capacity, that there are bases, perhaps around the world, that's a whole different set of implications, I think.
Well, it's the truth. Look,
yeah,
let me just give you what I think is what's going to happen, basically, right? I may be wrong about stuff. It's okay, but we're going to learn that there's non-humans out there that have evolved on different planets. I mean, I love time travel for sci-fi purposes, multi-dimensions, very sci-fi helpful. I'm not a fan of either one of those. I think the chances of that being the case are very, very slim. Other planets, absolutely. We're going to learn that they've developed on other planets, just like we have. No brainer. We're going to learn that eventually they learned how to travel star to star. Hey, we're getting close to that ourselves. Our physics is getting pretty cool. Check it out. We got a lot of physicists and teams that are looking at star to star travel. We haven't figured it yet, but they're starting to get close. It's just the way science has been evolving forever. All right. We're going to learn they can go from star to star, which is pretty cool. Because if they go from star to star, one day we can go from star to star. That's even cooler. All right. We're going to learn that they have come here. Right. We may learn that they've come here in ancient times and then left. We may learn that they have come here in less ancient times and not left, in the sense that they have established a presence. Right. Bases. Okay. So far, so good. We may learn, and this is, give you an idea where the issue is. This is now a major matter of speculation and discussion. Not are ETs, are there ETs? No. Are they walking amongst us? Which is kind of an advanced thinking, wouldn't you say? In other words, the issue of their existence, it's accepted, but are they living amongst us? That is where things start to get a little more interesting, problematic. Are they living amongst us? I'm not there yet. Now, occasionally, hanging out or something or whatever, right, is not that. Living amongst us means there's a substantial coidae of ETs of one type or another that are literally amongst us.
They look like us.
They probably would look like us, or if they can shapeshift, I'm not a big fan of that. Whatever, they're amongst us. They're hanging out. They could be at a Starbucks. They could be in a movie sitting next to us. Whatever. I don't have much faith in that. I don't think it's true, but it is a legitimate speculation. So we might learn that. We might learn, no, that's not that. Okay. We're going to learn that we have multiple crash vehicles we've been re-engineering and studying for decades. That's pretty cool. We're probably going to learn that we have actually developed some of that technology, which has incredibly significant implications for the human race as it's dealing with all of the multitude of problems it's created by allowing the population to get to 8 billion and trying to destroy the environment and just creating all manner of havoc and so forth, that this technology could help solve those problems, which currently we haven't got a chance in hell of solving, frankly, given what we know and the tech we have. But that new tech could open those doors. We also learned probably that the ETs are incredibly sophisticated in the life sciences, particularly with DNA. There's a lot of evidence for that. And that kind of science could be available to us, which opens up the possibilities of advanced age, disease prevention, meaning a less painful life, maybe live the same number of years, but have less illnesses. All of that could be emerge in a post-disclosure, post-contact, open contact era. We may learn that. All right. That's a lot, right? That's a lot. Now, we also may learn some of the less likely possibilities. That, yeah, the ETs are here. They've had a base. And now that we've disclosed, they have an agenda in which they're going to take over control of the planet. And we're going to pretty much dance to their tune. So sorry about that, but that's the way it's going to work out. That would not be nice. That would be bad. We might learn that. Do I think it's possible? Yeah. Probability? Low. As low as time travel? No. But low. All right. And there's some other variations of that. We may learn that, in fact, they've been creating human hybrids, primarily with the Greys, and we may learn that they are elsewhere. But now that we've kind of gotten to a place where we are willing to understand and accept the reality of extraterrestrial life and their engagement of us, those hybrids are coming back. And we're going to encourage you, hopefully without having to get serious about it, to allow them to be part of your world. And our first question will be, why would we do that? And hopefully the answer will be because their presence, which incorporates DNA from us, is going to provide capabilities which you do not have. In other words, they will be an asset, not a liability to the human race, to help you deal in a more rapid way with the extraordinary changes that disclosure is bringing and engaging the rest of, the galaxy, at least in the near term. So these are the kinds of things I expect to learn. I downplay most of the horrible stuff. I just don't see the evidence for it, but to dismiss it outright would be intellectually dishonest. But that's pretty good. Okay, now compare that list of things which what we are expecting now. Okay, what we are expecting now. And if you want to get a pretty comprehensive 1 hour and 20-minute visual essay on what we're expecting now, go to a very subversive and very subversive, not well known venue called HBO Max, and pull up a movie that's been out 6 months. It's hard to describe it. It's a semi-doc, but whatever. It's called 2073, and watch 2073 and compare what that is projecting with what I just projected based upon disclosure and open contact with extraterrestrials, and decide which of those futures you would prefer. Because let me be clear. The 9 nuclear nations, their intellects and their political scientists and spokespeople and politicians, the 9 nuclear nations are selling you the future of 2073. And the disclosure phenomena and the ET presence, as understood, is not selling you that future. It is selling you what I just described. And if I had the money to create a documentary that really demonstrated the difference between these two futures. By God, I would do it, but I don't. And I did make a 2-year hiatus, not hiatus, but a 2-year engagement of Hollywood. Unfortunately, it was during the pandemic and the writer strikes, and it chewed me up and spit me out along with a lot of other people. But I'm still here. That's a doc I would like to make, or even a narrative, a nonfiction, a narrative fiction movie. We are facing choices that are so profound we can't even get them in our vision, right? But there are those of us out there trying to compress it so you can get it in your peripheral vision and see these choices, because we have got to make those choices, and you can't make them if you can't see them. But once you see them in contrast, you can say, I think I take door number 1 and not door number 2, right? That's the way I kind of look, see how this work is and where and what it's about. The human race needs to have a choice. Right now, it has no choice. It's basically on the road to perdition, the road to hell. And while the efforts to try to show the options is there is a lot of very powerful entities that are trying to suppress our ability to see those options. They just want us to follow their lead, toe their mark, do what they tell us to say, and continue to believe that we do not have the right or the need to know the actual truth of this world. And if we did know the truth, unlike themselves, we couldn't handle it. That's what this all comes down to, gentlemen. I think we have done quite a bit here. I hope you edit this down, because some of it just got completely off the off in the toolies. But that's 2 hours and 44 minutes. No, it's 1 hour and 44 minutes. I'm sorry. It seemed longer, but that's okay. Let's go on a little bit longer, at least to 2 hours.
Okay. Where from here? I just want to say real quick, and we don't have to get hung up on this. I think it's wholly unrealistic that we'll ever be able to reconcile with the hybridization program, unless for some reason, the impact of the extraterrestrial presence, as a byproduct enlightens us somehow spiritually. People are never going to be able to accept the fact that our children, have been taken in the night, without our knowledge, and we don't know what was done to them. I mean, it's not just like the reproductive procedures, which are bad enough, but there's all kinds of other things, that are going on, and imaging, strange, procedures that we don't even understand. I think that. And I understand, why that's got to be last, if it ever comes. But I just can't see that ever happening, unless we're, in a much more spiritually enlightened state collectively. I just don't see how we could accept the abduction phenomenon as a reality.
Well, let me help. There are quite a few books about the abduction phenomena out there being read. Some of them are bestsellers. There have been films about the abduction phenomena. Hundreds of thousands of accounts of the abduction events have been sent, mostly not anonymously, but mostly confidentially, to researchers, and they're piled up in their files. We seem to have handled that pretty well.
I think we could acknowledge that it's happening, but I don't think we could accept that without feeling like they're our adversary, basically, without society, feeling like the extraterrestrials are hostile. I think we could accept that it's real, but I think that the possibility of society ever sort of coming to terms with that in its current state just seems really, really unlikely. Just seems.
Well, let's look at it from another angle. Over the last, I don't know, 2 years. No, it's not 2 years. At least 2 years. 10, 15, 20,000 children have literally been slaughtered in Gaza. A lot of them, obviously they're not guilty of anything. They just got slaughtered. Recently, they're getting killed when they're waiting for food. We're never going to be able to accept that. Let me put it this way: we will never be able to accept that without question. We will move on, however, but we will never be able to accept it, but we want it to stop. Okay, I get that. It's the same thing with the abduction phenomenon. I think that many people will never be able to accept that this was appropriate, that it was justifiable or anything. I get that. But it will likely stop and you move on. But really what you're getting at is this. Will the understanding of the confirmation of the fact that abductions were taking place, if you call them abductions, some people don't, but whatever, in which people were taking without an RSVP, and there was hybridization taking place. For sure, a significant portion, if not a majority, of all of the mostly women and some men who were involved in that program will never be able to accept an apology. They'll never be able to, how would you say, let it go. They're gonna have a very deep animosity about it till the day they die. People that are not involved in it are going to be a lot more understanding. They're going to go, it's like, it's really not good. The question is, will it stop? And this is significant.
Right. Will it stop?
If we get disclosure, one of the most significant things I'll be watching for and talking to my colleagues about is there been a change in contact? Has there been a change in the contactee events?
Yeah.
Are they stopping? Is the table work stopping? What about hybridization? Is there any further? I think it'll stop, but I don't know for sure. If it continues, however, it's going to be very, very awkward, because the list of things that people could do to sort of prevent or make abduction events as we know them difficult is a long list, but by and large, almost no one has the ability to do anything. They try to do stuff. They tie themselves to the bed. They put up cameras. It doesn't work. But there's actually a much longer
Works
list.
Temporarily, and then they just wait for an opportunity, and then they abduct them.
Yeah. So, but the list is actually quite long. So in a open, once their presence is confirmed, whether we've had open contact or not, there's going to be a significant effort to really intervene in this process, and it could get very nasty very quickly. And I don't think that's in the best interest of us or them. And so I'm leaning on the fact that it'll stop. But if it doesn't, then it's going to get interesting. And you're going to have people pretty damn mad about it. And overall, it's going to affect the ability of governments to deal with open contact with ETs. All right. And it's going to service a certain aspect of the human worldview, that like, okay, if you're not going to do that, okay, then we're coming after you. Okay, I don't care how powerful you are. We're going to take as many of you out as we can. So let's hope that's not the case. But there's not been any report that I'm aware of from any researcher or contactee, interestingly enough, that has ever said I was in their presence or whatever, and they told me that, yeah, after confirmation of our presence or after open contact, we will stop this. That's never come forward. They do occasionally come back with reports, like there have been contactees that have said we've asked them if there's a God, and they've told them, yes, there is. We've asked them if they are gods. They said, no, we aren't. Yeah, these kind of reports come back, but I've never heard of one in which the question was, what's your policy after we get disclosure?
Right, and we don't even know, for sure at all, what they plan to do with the hybrids. There's just
right.
No certainty on that at all. Some abductees are given this impression that there's going to be a new Earth, and are shown visions in their minds,
very possible,
of the hybrids living on Earth in some kind of idyllic situation. There's other abductees that are told that they're going to be taken to another planet and used as workers, essentially.
Wishful thinking. Look, I happen to think that the ETs that are visiting us now are hybrids that were allowed to evolve elsewhere. The reptilians, right? There's a reason they look reptilian. They don't live here, but they evolved elsewhere. How long that hybrid, quote, reptilian alien hybrid was been exist, I don't know, but It could be thousands, could be hundreds of thousands of years. The point is, I think that's an example. And I think the insectoids who are visiting, right, they turn up in the contactee events. We're a hybrid program that developed elsewhere ultimately. And so if I'm right about that, if that is the case, then one would conclude that the hybrids that are being generated now, for whatever reason, not hundreds of thousands of years ago, whatever, now, because the reptilian and insect DNA has been around a long time. Are they taken and they're going to be developing elsewhere, and we're just not going to see them again? Now, Dr. Jacobs thinks we will see them again, and it's not under very favorable circumstances. So This is advanced thinking. But let me make a little prediction, right, that I invite you to hold me to. If we get disclosure, we're going to start having a lot of hearings. We've already had some. We may have one or two more before disclosure, but after disclosure, we're going to have lots of hearings. It's going to go on months, maybe even years. But not long after disclosure, I don't know how, it could be 2 months, 8 months, 6 months, you're going to have a hearing, one of many, in which a number of researchers are going to be sitting at a table. They're going to be under oath. And one of the members of Congress is going to ask this question. Excuse me, Dr. So-and-so, what do you think has happened to the hybrids? Is it possible that they are going to return to Earth? Now, that's an advanced question. Okay, it ain't going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen even before disclosure. But after disclosure, that question is going to come up because it is common sense to ask it. And David Jacobs, I hope he's still around, may get the answer to his question. So it gives you a sense of what's coming if you want to look that far ahead.
He's convinced that that there's a whole new sort of a generation of hybrids that look identical to human, which he calls the hybrids, and are already on the planet and are being shown things. Are being shown are how to live by abductees. And I don't know what to make of that, but he's pretty
very significant. I actually was there at the conference in Laughlin when he and Bob, oh man, I'm getting so old. He and Robert Jacobs and Bud Hopkins. He and Bud Hopkins had called in to the conference saying, we need to come down, make a slot for us. They weren't on the schedule. And so they immediately did that. And so they then flew in with a special presentation, got up there together and talked about the fact that both of them, now this is way back, at least 20 years, might be 21, 22, I'm not sure, but it's quite a while, that both of them simultaneously were getting similar reports from some of the contactees that they're working with, right? Regressant, whatever. And they were struck that there was a similarity between these two separate contactee groups, whatever. And they were describing how they were being taken on ships, and among whatever the hell else was going on, they were asked to go amongst some hybrids and show them how to do stuff. Check out at a supermarket, I don't know, get a driver's license, whatever the hell. And that was a moment. Now, it didn't last. It did not take, they didn't have much of that happening, but they came down very excited to say, look, this is happening. And of course, Jacobs particularly was very concerned, which brings me to this speculation. And again, trust me, tonight I've done a hell of a lot of speculation. It's okay to speculate as long as you don't pass it off. It's like peer-reviewed research, all right? Is this. They may have taken DNA from reptilians and created a sentient reptilian hybrid species that is never going to live here, but has done quite well, but is part of the modern era of contact. They may have done the same thing with the reptilians, okay? But this is different. And what do I mean by that? If they have created almost identical looking hybrids, meaning they're not fully human, but they look human. In other words, they're very human, but they've got some other stuff in them. They've got some DNA. So they're basically a hybrid. And that has been confirmed by the Nordics, because the Nordics have been reported going back and they look almost identically human. Now that doesn't mean they could have an autopsy, and we wouldn't figure out that, wait a minute, there's more here than humans. The point is they look humans. And then you've got the hybrids, okay, which are recent and still happening. What's different about now than ancient Egypt? What's different about now than going back in the past, even 100, 200,000 years when they might have been doing genetic work, is that we are now a spacefaring high-tech civilization with enormous technology on the threshold of being able to go out in space. We're already out in space in our movies, incredibly sophisticated, realistic CGI and beyond, and it's about to get even better with AI. We are not ancient Egypt. And so, since they seem to have established the concept of taking Earth-based DNA and creating separate living elsewhere hybrids, the idea that in this case, they might say, oh no, we have developed them, they are off planet, but our intention is not to keep them there, we're going to bring them here. And why would they do that? Because we are not ancient Egypt. We are a spacefaring high-tech civilization. And unlike the ancient times, or even 200 or 300 years ago, the need for what they might bring to the table, whether they're absolutely identical looking humans, but got some DNA that gives them some rather significant abilities, or not strictly looking humans, but sort of looking humans that have other abilities, is paramount. We need it as a species, that as the extent species that we have now. We have reached a point where we cannot address and deal with the problems that we are creating for ourselves. We're over our head, okay, and we need help. All right, and though these entities that we're learning about is the help we're going to get, not to take over, not to enslave us, but simply to provide capabilities that we do not have. Now, that doesn't mean over time the human race could evolve to those, or being, how would you say, given some help to get to that place. But obviously, that might take time. And so we need help, mentors, and what have you. I kind of look at it that way. And until I learn, I get information that takes me a different place, I'm not David Jacobs. I think we are going to have an infusion of fully non-human entities into our society, not to rule us, but to help us. And obviously, I hope I live long enough to find out which way it's going to go.
Well, I think David Jacobs is doubtful, though, within reason, because I mean the Greys, we don't know really about the hybrids, or the hybrids, what they'll be like. But the Greys don't seem to give any care, to anything else other than their projects. They seem just completely centrally focused on that, and there's just no indication that they care at all about our society. Apart from maybe ingratiating their hybrids and bringing them knowledge that is useful in whatever they're planning. They don't seem to care about our development or us.
They're pretty cold. Yeah, they're cold. No question about it. It's a good point, which may explain why they have to be hybridized. In other words, in order to care, you gotta add the human component. And there's something else we do know that goes against the grain on this, and that is that the contactees, again, have provided accounts of experiences with every one of those types. I think the Greys tend to dominate, but believe me, there are plenty of accounts of interaction with Nordics in ships, right?
Yeah.
And generally, the consensus has been that the Nordics are very, very kind, very caring, supportive. Okay. So, let's take that on its face value. They're not fully human, but they're kind and supportive. I mean, would you mind having a lot of gorgeous Nordics hanging around being nice? I could go along with that. Greys, big problem. Hybrids, yeah. You've seen some of the renditions of hybrids. They're you're going to have to get used to that. So obviously, these are incredibly interesting speculations. They have enormous implications for us. It would be helpful if we had a reams of information so that our citizens, as well as our most advanced academics, could investigate, study, and think about it. But of course, we don't have that. There are no Nordics. There are no Greys. There are no hybrids. There are no contactees. There are no abductions. None of that is real. What little is happening, there are some things happening, but the government actually is faking all that in order to keep us in the dark about our super special program. There are none of this exists. Okay. And so we are forced to speculate in the dark. I am fed up with living in the dark because the United States government's turned off the lights. I try not to get too angry about it. The U.S. government has done some awful shit, which frankly is more justified. It justifies my anger much more than the truth embargo, right? Just really awful stuff. Meaning they did X. Everybody should have gone to jail for war crimes, whatever the hell. But what is worse about this? It's not doing X and it was awful, but it's doing something not so awful, but is extended over a long period of time. It's more disrespectful than awful, but it's also the implications of it in terms of long-term implications are rather profound. And so in that sense, it's worse. It's worse, right? You do something awful, you apologize. I'm so sorry I did that. Well, it was really bad, but I forgive you. What's going on now in the truth embargo is not like that. It's an ongoing fundamental program of systemic lying, disrespect, arrogant hubris that is just, and it's taking up our lives. In other words, it's not like you did something awful when I was 22, I forgive you, and now I go on with my life. No, they're denying this to us our entire life. People are living their entire life and not living to see the resolution of this issue. They're dying every day. Somebody doesn't get to see disclosure because they just outlived us, right? It's, in that sense, in a way, more irritating than some of the other awful things U.S. government's done and other governments have done. There's something about it that's fundamentally just awful at a certain level that it's really hard to describe. But, obviously I can't describe it, but I feel it. And I committed the rest of my life to ending it. And others have done the same. Okay. We have a almost no chance of ending war, which creates atrocities, unspeakable atrocities all the time. Right. And it actually tries to compete with another war to get even more atrocious. I mean, we have no current prospects of ending that, but we do have a very significant prospect of ending disclosure, ending this policy. And so I'm saying, let's go for the low-hanging fruit. Let's end the truth embargo, get disclosure, operate in a post-disclosure world. It might be that is actually how we end up ending war, the bane of human existence. And so what do you got to lose? Right? What do you got to lose?
Right. Well, Todd, do you have any final questions? I guess we're over 2 hours, so we can wrap it up, I guess.
Yeah, no, I have nothing to follow up with. It's very, very informative and mind-opening.
A little repetitive, but I tend to be repetitive. Let me do some quick promos and we can exit. I encourage people to support the organizations that have been formed specifically to help us in the post-disclosure world, mostly, but also to kind of help get us there. But increasingly, it's all about already getting there. The Soul Foundation, it's thesoulfoundation.org. The UAP Disclosure Fund at uapdisclosurefund.org. Nonprofits, of course. The new, Disclosure Fund is a 501c3. It's not a nonprofit, but it is a political organization. The New Paradigm Institute.org, also a nonprofit, which has got multiple projects going on. The Paradigm Research Group is my organization, which is a nonprofit, very small, but yet maneuverable. I'm hoping to do another X conference, but I've got to raise some money too. But I don't need millions. I just need $25,000. So if anybody's got that, drop it into my donation page, paradigmresearchgroup.org, and I'll immediately schedule the next X conference. Then the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, I helped form that with Dan Harari, a publicist in Hollywood, also a nonprofit, a unique organization. Check it out, HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org. You may want to be a member, or you may just want to support it. It's doing some pretty cool things in a way that no other organization is. And there are other organizations forming. There's other conferences coming. There's an amazing event coming up in, I think it's August, called the Psi Games, in which some very significant people are coming together to engage directly and in lectures the emerging truth about the fact that, yeah, the ETs are all telepathic. And guess what? Some humans are as well, something the government has been loath to acknowledge and has done everything to suppress that research while doing its own research on telepathy and remote viewing for decades, right? Because, again, we can't handle that truth either. The Psi Games, check it out, PSI Games, that's coming up. And, of course, MUFON's having a major conference a little later this year. I forget exactly where, but just go to MUFON.org. You can find out. And there are other conferences in the works. We're not going to give up. This is not going to go backwards. The politicians, I think, are starting to see that and signing on to this, and I hope they continue to do so. The Department of Defense and the managers of the truth embargo haven't figured it out yet. Many of them haven't figured it out yet, and they're trying to extend this embargo. They're going to regret this. It's not going to go well in their resume. History is not going to be kind. But just about everywhere else, we're making progress. So support any and all groups that are trying to end the truth embargo and those that are preparing to deal with the post-disclosure world and help to shape it so that it's not simply a new version of the old world, the pre-disclosure world. Because I tell you, there's plenty of people that would love to just have everything stay the same, except there's ET. We know that there's ETs, right? But everything else stays the same. And that is the last thing we want to have happen.
Yes.
Hold on.
Very good. Stephen, thank you so much for your time and your information. It has been an honor to have you on our show. I would also like to say that, tonight we didn't just pull back the curtain. We tore it wide open. We looked into the face of disclosure and we didn't blink. We talked about the truth, the kind that's been buried for generations behind government walls, cloaked in national security, and guarded by fear. But as Stephen reminded us, the truth embargo is on borrowed time. The UFO phenomenon, the ET presence, the abductions, the hybrids, the shifting worldview, we're all about to face. None of this is theoretical anymore. It's coming, and it's coming fast. And when the truth lands, how we react will define us. Will we turn on each other? Will we evolve? Because in the end, this was never just about the visitors. It's about us, about who we are when the lights come on, about what kind of future we choose when the veil lifts. And there's no one left to lie to. So ask the hard questions, challenge the official narrative, stay brave, stay grounded, and most of all, stay human. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us tonight on this episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. Thanks, everybody.
Ad Astra.
Thank you for tuning in with us tonight. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. A Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure is looking to talk with ufologists, researchers, investigators, contactees, abductees, channelers, and more for upcoming shows. Or if you have stories, photos, videos, questions, suggestions, or comments, please contact us through Messenger or email us at paranomalypodcast@gmail.com. And you can also visit us at paranomalypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. I thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure.